Welcome to Soft Hour Library. Tonight's story begins now. Close your eyes and rest.
Chapter 13, The Girl with the Anxious Eyes. We lunched with an excellent appetite. I understood well enough that Poirot did not wish to discuss the tragedy where we could so easily be overheard. But as is usual when one topic fills the mind to the exclusion of everything else, no other subject of interest seemed to present itself. For a while we ate in silence, and then Poirot observed maliciously, "A by N, and your indiscretions, you recount them not." I felt myself blushing. "Oh, you mean this morning?" I endeavored to adopt a tone of absolute nonchalance. But I was no match for Poirot. In a very few minutes he had extracted the whole story from me, his eyes twinkling as he did so. "Tynes, a story of the most romantic. What is her name, this charming young lady?" I had to confess that I did not know. Still more romantic, the first rencontre in the train from Paris, the second here. Journeys end in lovers' meetings, is not that the saying? Don't be an ass, Poirot. Yesterday it was Mademoiselle d'Aubreuil, today it is Mademoiselle Cinderella. Decidedly you have the heart of a Turk, Hastings. You should establish a harem. It's all very well to rag me. Mademoiselle d'Aubreuil is a very beautiful girl, and I do admire her immensely. I don't mind admitting it. The others nothing. Don't suppose I shall ever see her again. She was quite amusing to talk to just for a railway journey, but she's not the kind of girl I should ever get keen on. Why? Well, it sounds snobbish perhaps, but she's not a lady, not in any sense of the word. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. There was less raillery in his voice as he asked, "You believe, then, in birth and breeding?" I may be old-fashioned, but I certainly don't believe in marrying out of one's class. It never answers. I agree with you, mon ami. 99 times out of 100, it is as you say, but there is always the 100th time. Still, that does not arise, as you do not propose to see the lady again. His last words were almost a question, and I was aware of the sharpness with which he darted a glance at me, and before my eyes, writ large in letters of fire, I saw the words Hotel du Fer, and I heard again her voice saying, "Come and look me up," and my own answering with empressement, "I will." Well, what of it? I had meant to go at the time, but since then I had had time to reflect. I did not like the girl. Thinking it over in cold blood, I came definitely to the conclusion that I disliked her intensely. I had got hauled over the coals for foolishly gratifying her morbid curiosity, and I had not the least wish to see her again. I answered Poirot lightly enough. "She asked me to look her up, but of course I shan't." "Why, of course?" "Well, I don't want to." "I see." He studied me attentively for some minutes. "Yes, I see very well, and you are wise. Stick to what you have said." "That seems to be your invariable advice," I remarked, rather piqued. "Ah, my friend, have faith in Papa Poirot. Some day, if you permit, I will arrange you a marriage of great suitability." "Thank you," I said, laughing, "but the prospect leaves me cold." Poirot sighed and shook his head. "Les Anglais," he murmured. "No method, absolutely none whatever. They leave all to chance." He frowned and altered the position of the salt cellar. "Mademoiselle Cinderella is staying at the Hotel d'Angleterre you told me, did you not?" "No, Hotel du Fer." "True, I forgot." A moment's misgiving shot across my mind. Surely I had never mentioned any hotel to Poirot. I looked across at him and felt reassured. He was cutting his bread into neat little squares, completely absorbed in his task. He must have fancied I had told him where the girl was staying. We had coffee outside facing the sea. Poirot smoked one of his tiny cigarettes and then drew his watch from his pocket. The train to Paris leaves at 2:25, he observed. I should be starting. Paris, I cried. That is what I said, mon ami. You are going to Paris, but why? He replied very seriously. To look for the murderer of M. Renaud. You think he is in Paris? I am quite certain that he is not. Nevertheless, it is there that I must look for him. You do not understand, but I will explain it all to you in good time. Believe me, this journey to Paris is necessary. I shall not be away long. In all probability, I shall return tomorrow. I do not propose that you should accompany me. Remain here and keep an eye on Giraud. Also cultivate the society of M. Renaud Fils. And thirdly, if you wish, endeavor to cut him out with Mademoiselle Marthe. But I fear you will not have great success. I did not quite relish the last remark. That reminds me, I said. I meant to ask you how you knew about those two. Mon ami, I know human nature. Throw together a boy young Renaud and a beautiful girl like Mademoiselle Marthe, and the result is almost inevitable. Then, the quarrel, it was money or a woman, and remembering Léonie's description of the lad's anger, I decided on the latter. So I made my guess, and I was right. And that was why you warned me against setting my heart on the lady. You already suspected that she loved young Renaud. Poirot smiled. At any rate, I saw that she had anxious eyes. That is how I always think of Mademoiselle d'Aubreuil as the girl with the anxious eyes. His voice was so grave that it impressed me uncomfortably. What do you mean by that, Poirot? I fancy, my friend, that we shall see before very long, but I must start. You've oceans of time. Perhaps, but I like plenty of leisure at the station. I do not wish to rush, to hurry, to excite myself. At all events, I said, rising, I will come and see you off. You will do nothing of the sort. I forbid it. He was so peremptory that I stared at him in surprise. He nodded emphatically. I mean it, mon ami. Au revoir. You permit that I embrace you. Ah no, I forget that it is not the English custom. Une poignée de main, alors. I felt rather at a loose end after Poirot had left me. I strolled down the beach and watched the bathers without feeling energetic enough to join them. I rather fancied that Cinderella might be disporting herself amongst them in some wonderful costume, but I saw no signs of her. I strolled aimlessly along the sands towards the further end of the town. It occurred to me that, after all, it would only be decent feeling on my part to inquire after the girl. And it would save trouble in the end. The matter would then be finished with. There would be no need for me to trouble about her any further. But if I did not go at all, she might quite possibly come and look me up at the villa. And that would be annoying in every way. Decidedly, it would be better to pay a short call, in the course of which I could make it quite clear that I could do nothing further for her in my capacity of showman. Accordingly, I left the beach and walked inland. I soon found the Hotel du Fer, a very unpretentious building. It was annoying in the extreme not to know the lady's name, and to save my dignity, I decided to stroll inside and look around. Probably I should find her in the lounge. Merlinville was a small place. You left your hotel to go to the beach, and you left the beach to return to the hotel. There were no other attractions. There was a casino being built, but it was not yet completed. I had walked the length of the beach without seeing her, therefore she must be in the hotel. I went in. Several people were sitting in the tiny lounge, but my quarry was not amongst them. I looked into some other rooms, but there was no sign of her. I waited for some time, till my impatience got the better of me. I took the concierge aside and slipped 5 francs into his hand. I wish to see a lady who is staying here, a young English lady. Small and dark, I am not sure of her name. The man shook his head and seemed to be suppressing a grin. There is no such lady as you describe staying here. She is American, possibly, I suggested. These fellows are so stupid. But the man continued to shake his head. No, monsieur. There are only 6 or 7 English and American ladies altogether, and they are all much older than the lady you are seeking. It is not here that you will find her, monsieur." He was so positive that I felt doubts. "But the lady told me she was staying here." "Monsieur must have made a mistake, or it is more likely the lady did, since there has been another gentleman here inquiring for her." "What is that you say?" I cried, surprised. "But yes, monsieur, a gentleman who described her just as you have done." "What was he like?" "He was a small gentleman, well dressed, very neat, very spotless, the moustache very stiff, the head of a peculiar shape, and the eyes green." Poirot, so that was why he refused to let me accompany him to the station. The impertinence of it. I would thank him not to meddle in my concerns. Did he fancy I needed a nurse to look after me? Thanking the man, I departed, somewhat at a loss, and still much incensed with my meddlesome friend. I regretted that he was, for the moment, out of reach. I should have enjoyed telling him what I thought of his unwarranted interference. Had I not distinctly told him that I had no intention of seeing the girl? Decidedly, one's friends can be too zealous. But where was the lady? I set aside my wrath and tried to puzzle it out. Evidently, through inadvertence, she had named the wrong hotel. Then another thought struck me. Was it inadvertence, or had she deliberately withheld her name and given me the wrong address? The more I thought about it, the more I felt convinced that this last surmise of mine was right. For some reason or other, she did not wish to let the acquaintance ripen into friendship. Though half an hour earlier this had been precisely my own view, I did not enjoy having the tables turned upon me. The whole affair was profoundly unsatisfactory, and I went up to the Villa Genevieve in a condition of distinct ill humor. I did not go to the house, but went up the path to the little bench by the shed and sat there moodily enough. I was distracted from my thoughts by the sound of voices close at hand. In a second or two, I realized that they came, not from the garden I was in, but from the adjoining garden of the Villa Marguerite, and that they were approaching rapidly. A girl's voice was speaking, a voice that I recognized as that of the beautiful Marthe. "Chérie," she was saying, "is it really true? Are all our troubles over?" "You know it, Marthe," Jack Renaud replied. "Nothing can part us now, beloved. The last obstacle to our union is removed. Nothing can take you from me." "Nothing," the girl murmured. "Oh, Jack, Jack, I am afraid." I had moved to depart, realizing that I was quite unintentionally eavesdropping. As I rose to my feet, I caught sight of them through a gap in the hedge. They stood together facing me, the man's arm round the girl, his eyes looking into hers. They were a splendid-looking couple, the dark, well-knit boy and the fair young goddess. They seemed made for each other as they stood there, happy in spite of the terrible tragedy that overshadowed their young lives. But the girl's face was troubled, and Jack Renaud seemed to recognize it as he held her closer to him and asked, "But what are you afraid of, darling? What is there to fear now?" And then I saw the look in her eyes, the look Poirot had spoken of, as she murmured, so that I almost guessed at the words. "I am afraid for you." I did not hear young Renaud's answer, for my attention was distracted by an unusual appearance a little further down the hedge. There appeared to be a brown bush there, which seemed odd, to say the least of it. So early in the summer, I stepped along to investigate, but at my advance, the brown bush withdrew itself precipitately and faced me with a finger to its lips. It was Giraud. Enjoining caution, he led the way round the shed until we were out of earshot. "What were you doing there?" I asked. "Exactly what you were doing, listening." "But I was not there on purpose." "Ah," said Giraud, "I was." As always, I admired the man whilst disliking him. He looked me up and down with a sort of contemptuous disfavor. "You didn't help matters by butting in. I might have heard something useful in a minute. What have you done with your old fossil? M. Poirot has gone to Paris, I replied coldly. And I can tell you, M. Gerard, that he is anything but an old fossil. He has solved many cases that have completely baffled the English police. Bar the English police, Gerard snapped his fingers disdainfully. They must be on a level with our examining magistrates. So he has gone to Paris, has he? Well, a good thing. The longer he stays there, the better. But what does he think he will find there? I thought I read in the question a tinge of uneasiness. I drew myself up. That I am not at liberty to say, I said quietly. Gerard subjected me to a piercing stare. He has probably enough sense not to tell you, he remarked rudely. Good afternoon, I'm busy. And with that he turned on his heel and left me without ceremony. Matters seemed at a standstill at the Villa Genevieve. Gerard evidently did not desire my company, and from what I had seen, it seemed fairly certain that Jack Renaud did not either. I went back to the town, had an enjoyable bath, and returned to the hotel. I turned in early, wondering whether the following day would bring forth anything of interest. I was wholly unprepared for what it did bring forth. I was eating my petit déjeuner in the dining room when the waiter, who had been talking to someone outside, came back in. Obvious excitement. He hesitated for a minute, fidgeting with his napkin, and then burst out. Monsieur will pardon me, but he is connected, is he not, with the affair at the Villa Genevieve? Yes, I said eagerly. Why? Monsieur has not heard the news, though. What news? That there has been another murder there last night. What? Leaving my breakfast, I caught up my hat and ran as fast as I could. Another murder and Poirot away, what fatality, but who had been murdered? I dashed in at the gate. A group of the servants was in the drive, talking and gesticulating. I caught hold of Francis. What has happened? Oh, monsieur, another death. It is terrible. There is a curse upon the house. But yes, I say it, a curse. They should send for M. le Curé to bring some holy water. Never will I sleep another night under that roof. It might be my turn, who knows? She crossed herself. Yes, I cried, but who has been killed? Do I know me, a man, a stranger? They found him up there in the shed, not 100 yards from where they found poor monsieur, and that is not all. He is stabbed to the heart with the same dagger. Chapter 14, The Second Body. Waiting for no more, I turned and ran up the path to the shed. The two men on guard there stood aside to let me pass, and filled with excitement, I entered. The light was dim. The place was a mere rough wooden erection to keep old pots and tools in. I had entered impetuously, but on the threshold I checked myself, fascinated by the spectacle before me. Gerard was on his hands and knees, a pocket torch in his hand with which he was examining every inch of the ground. He looked up with a frown at my entrance, then his face relaxed a little in a sort of good-humored contempt. Arce el Anglais, enter then. Let us see what you can make of this affair. Rather strung by his tone, I stooped my head and passed in. There he is, said Gerard, flashing his torch to the far corner. I stepped across. The dead man lay straight upon his back. He was of medium height, swarthy of complexion, and possibly about 50 years of age. He was neatly dressed in a dark blue suit, well cut and probably made by an expensive tailor, but not new. His face was terribly convulsed, and on his left side, just over the heart, the hilt of a dagger stood up, black and shining. I recognized it. It was the same dagger I had seen reposing in the glass jar the preceding morning. I'm expecting the doctor any minute, explained Gerard. Although we hardly need him, there's no doubt what the man died of. He was stabbed to the heart, and death must have been pretty well instantaneous. When was it done? Last night. Gerard shook his head. Hardly. I don't lay down the law on medical evidence, but the man has been dead well over 12 hours. When do you say you last saw that dagger? About 10 o'clock yesterday morning. Then I should be inclined to fix the crime as being done not long after that. But people were passing and repassing this shed continually. Gerard laughed disagreeably. You progressed to a marvel. Who told you he was killed in this shed? Well, I felt flustered. I assumed it. Oh, what a fine detective. Look at him, moaned Petit. Does a man stabbed to the heart fall like that, neatly with his feet together and his arms to his side? No. Again, does a man lie down on his back and permit himself to be stabbed without raising a hand to defend himself? It is absurd, is it not? But see here and here, he flashed the torch along the ground. I saw curious irregular marks in the soft dirt. He was dragged here after he was dead. Half dragged, half carried by two people. Their tracks do not show on the hard ground outside, and here they have been careful to obliterate them. But one of the two was a woman, my young friend. A woman? Yes. But if the tracks are obliterated, how do you know? Because blurred as they are, the prints of the woman's shoe are unmistakable. Also by this, and leaning forward, he drew something from the handle of the dagger and held it up for me to see. It was a woman's long black hair, similar to the one Poirot had taken from the armchair in the library. With a slightly ironic smile, he wound it round the dagger again. We will leave things as they are as much as possible, he explained. It pleases the examining magistrate. A.N., do you notice anything else? I was forced to shake my head. Look at his hands. I did. The nails were broken and discolored, and the skin was hard. It hardly enlightened me as much as I should have liked it to have done. I looked up at Gerard. They are not the hands of a gentleman, he said, answering my look. On the contrary, his clothes are those of a well-to-do man. That is curious, is it not? Very curious, I agreed. And none of his clothing is marked. What do we learn from that? This man was trying to pass himself off as other than he was. He was masquerading. Why? Did he fear something? Was he trying to escape by disguising himself? As yet we do not know, but one thing we do know. He was as anxious to conceal his identity as we are to discover it. He looked down at the body again. As before, there are no fingerprints on the handle of the dagger. The murderer again wore gloves. You think, then, that the murderer was the same in both cases? I asked eagerly. Gerard became inscrutable. Never mind what I think, we shall see, Marchot. The Sergeant de Ville appeared at the doorway. Monsieur, why is Madame Renaud not here? I sent for her a quarter of an hour ago. She is coming up the path now, monsieur, and her son with her. Good, I only want one at a time, though. Marchot saluted and disappeared again. A moment later he reappeared with Mrs. Renaud. Here is Madame. Gerard came forward with a curt bow. This way. Madame, he led her across, and then, standing suddenly aside, here is the man, do you know him? And as he spoke, his eyes, gimlet-like, bored into her face, seeking to read her mind, noting every indication of her manner. But Mrs. Renaud remained perfectly calm, too calm, I felt. She looked down at the corpse almost without interest, certainly without any sign of agitation or recognition. No, she said, I have never seen him in my life. He is quite a stranger to me. You are sure? Quite sure? You do not recognize in him one of your assailants, for instance? No, she seemed to hesitate, as though struck by the idea. No, I do not think so. Of course they wore beards, false ones the examining magistrate thought, but still, no. Now she seemed to make her mind up definitely. I am sure neither of the two was this man. Very well, madame, that is all then. She stepped out with head erect, the sun flashing on the silver threads in her hair. Jack Renaud succeeded her. He, too, failed to identify the man in a completely natural manner. Gerard merely grunted. Whether he was pleased or chagrined I could not tell. He merely called to Marchot. "You have got the other there." "Yes, monsieur." "Bring her in then." The other was Madame d'Aubreuil. She came indignantly, protesting with vehemence. "I object, monsieur. This is an outrage. What have I to do with all this?" "Madame," said Gerard brutally, "I am investigating not one murder, but 2 murders. For all I know, you may have committed them both." "How dare you?" she cried. "How dare you insult me by such a wild accusation? It is infamous." "Infamous, is it? What about this?" Stooping, he again detached the hair and held it up. "Do you see this, madame?" He advanced towards her. "You permit that I see whether it matches." With a cry, she started backwards, white to the lips. "It is false, I swear it. I know nothing of the crime, of either crime. Anyone who says I do." "Lies, mon Dieu, what shall I do?" "Calm yourself, madame," said Gerard coldly. "No one has accused you as yet, but you will do well to answer my questions without more ado." "Anything you wish, monsieur." "Look at the dead man. Have you ever seen him before?" Drawing nearer, a little of the color creeping back to her face, Madame d'Aubreuil looked down at the victim with a certain amount of interest and curiosity. Then she shook her head. "I do not know him." It seemed impossible to doubt her. The words came so naturally. Gerard dismissed her with a nod of the head. "You are letting her go?" I asked in a low voice. "Is that wise? Surely that black hair is from her head." "I do not need teaching my business," said Gerard dryly. "She is under surveillance. I have no wish to arrest her as yet." Then, frowning, he gazed down at the body. "Should you say that was a Spanish type at all?" he asked suddenly. I considered the face carefully. "No," I said at last. "I should put him down as a Frenchman most decidedly." Gerard gave a grunt of dissatisfaction. "Same here." He stood there for a moment, then with an imperative gesture he waved me aside, and once more on hands and knees he continued his search of the floor of the shed. He was marvelous. Nothing escaped him. Inch by inch he went over the floor, turning over pots, examining old sacks. He pounced on a bundle by the door, but it proved to be only a ragged coat and trousers, and he flung it down again with a snarl. 2 pairs of old gloves interested him, but in the end he shook his head and laid them aside. Then he went back to the pots, methodically turning them over one by one. In the end, he rose to his feet and shook his head thoughtfully. He seemed baffled and perplexed. I think he had forgotten my presence. But at that moment, a stir and bustle was heard outside, and our old friend, the examining magistrate, accompanied by his clerk and M. Bex, with the doctor behind him, came bustling in. "But this is extraordinary, Mr. Gerard," cried M. Hortet. "Another crime. We have not got to the bottom of this case. There is some deep mystery here, but who is the victim this time?" "That is just what nobody can tell us, M. le Juge. He has not been identified." "Where is the body?" asked the doctor. Gerard moved aside a little. "There in the corner. He has been stabbed to the heart, as you see, and with the dagger that was stolen yesterday morning. I fancy that the murder followed hard upon the theft, but that is for you to say. You can handle the dagger freely. There are no fingerprints on it." The doctor knelt down by the dead man, and Gerard turned to the examining magistrate. "A pretty little problem, is it not? But I shall solve it." "And so no one can identify him," mused the magistrate. Could it possibly be one of the assassins? They may have fallen out among themselves. Giraud shook his head. The man is a Frenchman. I would take my oath of that. But at that moment, they were interrupted by the doctor, who was sitting back on his heels with a perplexed expression. You say he was killed yesterday morning. I fix it by the theft of the dagger, explained Giraud. He may, of course, have been killed later in the day. Later in the day? Fiddlesticks. This man has been dead at least 48 hours and probably longer. We stared at each other in blank amazement. Chapter 15, A Photograph. The doctor's words were so surprising that we were all momentarily taken aback. Here was a man stabbed with a dagger which we knew to have been stolen only 24 hours previously, and yet Dr. Durand asserted positively that he had been dead at least 48 hours. The whole thing was fantastic to the last extreme. We were still recovering from the surprise of the doctor's announcement when a telegram was brought to me. It had been sent up from the hotel to the villa. I tore it open. It was from Poirot and announced his return by the train arriving at Merlinville at 12:28. I looked at my watch and saw that I had just time to get comfortably to the station and meet him there. I felt that it was of the utmost importance that he should know at once of the new and startling developments in the case. Evidently, I reflected, Poirot had had no difficulty in finding what he wanted in Paris. The quickness of his return proved that very few hours had sufficed. I wondered how he would take the exciting news I had to impart. The train was some minutes late, and I strolled aimlessly up and down the platform until it occurred to me that I might pass the time by asking a few questions as to who had left Merlinville by the last train on the evening of the tragedy. I approached the chief porter, an intelligent-looking man, and had little difficulty in persuading him to enter upon the subject. It was a disgrace to the police, he hotly affirmed, that such brigands of assassins should be allowed to go about unpunished. I hinted that there was some possibility they might have left by the midnight train, but he negatived the idea decidedly. He would have noticed 2 foreigners, he was sure of it. Only about 20 people had left by the train, and he could not have failed to observe them. I do not know what put the idea into my head. Possibly it was the deep anxiety underlying Marthe d'Aubruil's tones, but I asked suddenly, Young M. Renaud, he did not leave by that train, did he? Ah no, monsieur. To arrive and start off again within half an hour, it would not be amusing, that. I stared at the man, the significance of his words almost escaping me. Then I saw. You mean, I said, my heart beating a little, that M. Jacques Renaud arrived at Merlinville that evening? But yes, monsieur, by the last train arriving the other way, the 11:40. My brain whirled. That, then, was the reason of Marthe's poignant anxiety. Jacques Renaud had been in Merlinville on the night of the crime, but why had he not said so? Why, on the contrary, had he led us to believe that he had remained in Cherbourg? Remembering his frank, boyish countenance, I could hardly bring myself to believe that he had any connection with the crime. Yet why this silence on his part about so vital a matter? One thing was certain, Marthe had known all along. Hence her anxiety and her eager questioning of Poirot to know whether anyone was suspected. My cogitations were interrupted by the arrival of the train, and in another moment I was greeting Poirot. The little man was radiant. He beamed and vociferated, and forgetting my English reluctance, embraced me warmly on the platform. Mon cher ami, I have succeeded, but succeeded to a marvel. Indeed, I'm delighted to hear it. Have you heard the latest here? How would you that I should hear anything? There have been some developments, eh? The brave Giraud, he has made an arrest, or even arrests perhaps. Ah, but I will make him look foolish, that one. But where are you taking me, my friend? Do we not go to the hotel? It is necessary that I attend to my moustaches. They are deplorably limp from the heat of traveling. Also, without doubt, there is dust on my coat and my tie that I must rearrange. I cut short his remonstrances. My dear Poirot, never mind all that. We must go to the villa at once. There has been another murder. I have frequently been disappointed when fancying that I was giving news of importance to my friend. Either he has known it already or he has dismissed it as irrelevant to the main issue, and in the latter case events have usually proved him justified. But this time I could not complain of missing my effect. Never have I seen a man so flabbergasted. His jaw dropped. All the jauntiness went out of his bearing. He stared at me open-mouthed. "What is that you say? Another murder? Ah, then I am all wrong. I have failed. Gerard may mock himself at me, he will have reason. You did not expect it then." "I not the least in the world. It demolishes my theory. It ruins everything. No." He stopped dead, thumping himself on the chest. "It is impossible. I cannot be wrong. The facts, taken methodically and in their proper order, admit of only one explanation. I must be right. I am right." "But then," he interrupted me. "Wait, my friend. I must be right. Therefore this new murder is impossible unless, oh wait, I implore you, say no word." He was silent for a moment or two, then resuming his normal manner, he said in a quiet, assured voice, "The victim is a man of middle age. His body was found in the locked shed near the scene of the crime and had been dead at least 48 hours. And it is most probable that he was stabbed in a similar manner to M. Renaud, though not necessarily in the back." It was my turn to gape, and gape I did. In all my knowledge of Poirot, he had never done anything so amazing as this, and almost inevitably, a doubt crossed my mind. "Poirot," I cried, "you're pulling my leg. You've heard all about it already." He turned his earnest gaze upon me reproachfully. "Would I do such a thing? I assure you that I have heard nothing whatsoever. Did you not observe the shock your news was to me? But how on earth could you know all that?" "I was right then, but I knew it. The little grey cells, my friend, the little grey cells, they told me. Thus, and in no other way, could there have been a second death. Now tell me all. If we go round to the left here, we can take a short cut across the golf links, which will bring us to the back of the Villa Genevieve much more quickly." As we walked, taking the way he had indicated, I recounted all I knew. Poirot listened attentively. "The dagger was in the wound, you say? That is curious. You are sure it was the same one?" "Absolutely certain. That's what makes it so impossible." "Nothing is impossible. There may have been two daggers." I raised my eyebrows. "Surely that is, in the highest degree, unlikely. It would be a most extraordinary coincidence." "You speak as usual, without reflection, Hastings. In some cases, two identical weapons would be highly improbable, but not here. This particular weapon was a war souvenir which was made to Jack Renaud's orders. It is really highly unlikely, when you come to think of it, that he should have had only one made. Very probably he would have another for his own use." "But nobody has mentioned such a thing," I objected. A hint of the lecturer crept into Poirot's tone. "My friend, in working upon a case, one does not take into account only the things that are mentioned. There is no reason to mention many things which may be important. Equally, there is often an excellent reason for not mentioning them. You can take your choice of the two motives." I was silent, impressed in spite of myself. Another few minutes brought us to the famous shed. We found all our friends there, and after an interchange of polite amenities, Poirot began his task. Having watched Gerard at work, I was keenly interested. Poirot bestowed but a cursory glance on the surroundings. The only thing he examined was the ragged coat and trousers by the door. A disdainful smile rose to Gerard's lips, and as though noting it, Poirot flung the bundle down again. Old clothes of the gardener S, he queried. Exactly, said Gerard. Poirot knelt down by the body. His fingers were rapid but methodical. He examined the texture of the clothes and satisfied himself that there were no marks on them. The boots he subjected to special care, also the dirty and broken fingernails. Whilst examining the latter, he threw a quick question at Gerard. You saw these? Yes, I saw them, replied the other. His face remained inscrutable. Suddenly, Poirot stiffened. Dr. Durand. Yes, the doctor came forward. There is foam on the lips. You observed it. I didn't notice it, I must admit. But you observe it now. Oh, certainly. Poirot again shot a question at Gerard. You noticed it without doubt. The other did not reply. Poirot proceeded. The dagger had been withdrawn from the wound. It reposed in a glass jar by the side of the body. Poirot examined it, then he studied the wound closely. When he looked up, his eyes were excited and shone with the green light I knew so well. It is a strange wound, this. It has not bled. There is no stain on the clothes. The blade of the dagger is slightly discolored, that is all. What do you think, M. le Docteur? I can only say that it is most abnormal. It is not abnormal at all. It is most simple. The man was stabbed after he was dead. And stilling the clamor of voices that arose with a wave of his hand, Poirot turned to Gerard and added, M. Gerard agrees with me, do you not, monsieur? Whatever Gerard's real belief, he accepted the position without moving a muscle. Calmly and almost scornfully he replied, Certainly I agree. The murmur of surprise and interest broke out again. But what an idea, cried M. Hortet. To stab a man after he is dead, barbaric, unheard of, some unappeasable hate perhaps. No, M. le Juge, said Poirot. I should fancy it was done quite cold-bloodedly to create an impression. What impression? The impression it nearly did create, returned Poirot oracularly. M. Bex had been thinking. How then was the man killed? He was not killed, he died. He died, M. le Juge, if I am not much mistaken, of an epileptic fit. This statement of Poirot's again aroused considerable excitement. Dr. Durand knelt down again and made a searching examination. At last, he rose to his feet. Well, M. le Docteur. M. Poirot, I am inclined to believe that you are correct in your assertion. I was misled to begin with. The incontrovertible fact that the man had been stabbed distracted my attention from any other. Indications. Poirot was the hero of the hour. The examining magistrate was profuse in compliments. Poirot responded gracefully and then excused himself on the pretext that neither he nor I had yet lunched and that he wished to repair the ravages of the journey. As we were about to leave the shed, Gerard approached us. One more thing, M. Poirot, he said in his suave, mocking voice. We found this coiled round the handle of the dagger, a woman's hair. Ah, said Poirot, a woman's hair, what woman's, I wonder? I wonder also, said Gerard. Then, with a bow, he left us. He was insistent, the good Gerard, said Poirot thoughtfully as we walked towards the hotel. I wonder in what direction he hopes to mislead me, a woman's hair, H.M. We lunched heartily, but I found Poirot somewhat distrait and inattentive. Afterwards, we went up to our sitting room, and there I begged him to tell me something of his mysterious journey to Paris. Willingly, my friend, I went to Paris to find this. He took from his pocket a small faded newspaper cutting. It was the reproduction of a woman's photograph. He handed it to me. I uttered an exclamation. You recognize it, my friend? I nodded, although the photo obviously dated from very many years back. and the hair was dressed in a different style, the likeness was unmistakable. "Madame d'Aubreuil," I exclaimed. Poirot shook his head with a smile. "Not quite correct, my friend. She did not call herself by that name in those days. That is a picture of the notorious Madame Beroldy." Madame Beroldy, in a flash the whole thing came back to me, the murder trial that had evoked such worldwide interest. The Beroldy case. Chapter 16, The Beroldy case. Some 20 years or so before the opening of the present story, Monsieur Arnold Beroldy, a native of Lyons, arrived in Paris, accompanied by his pretty wife and their little daughter, a mere babe. Monsieur Beroldy was a junior partner in a firm of wine merchants, a stout middle-aged man, fond of the good things of life, devoted to his charming wife, and altogether unremarkable in every way. The firm in which Monsieur Beroldy was a partner was a small one, and although doing well, it did not yield a large income to the junior partner. The Beroldys had a small apartment and lived in a very modest fashion to begin with. Unremarkable though Monsieur Beroldy might be, his wife was plentifully gilded with the brush of romance. Young and good-looking, and gifted withal with a singular charm of manner, Madame Beroldy at once created a stir in the quarter, especially when it began to be whispered that some interesting mystery surrounded her birth. It was rumored that she was the illegitimate daughter of a Russian Grand Duke. Others asserted that it was an Austrian Archduke, and that the union was legal, though morganatic. But all stories agreed upon one point, that Jean Beroldy was the center of an interesting mystery. Questioned by the curious, Madame Beroldy did not deny these rumors. On the other hand, she let it be clearly understood that though her lips were sealed, all these stories had a foundation in fact. To intimate friends, she unburdened herself further, spoke of political intrigues, of papers, of obscure dangers that threatened her. There was also much talk of crown jewels that were to be sold secretly, with herself acting as the go-between. Amongst the friends and acquaintances of the Beroldys was a young lawyer, Georges Queneau. It was soon evident that the fascinating Jean had completely enslaved his heart. Madame Beroldy encouraged the young man in a discreet fashion, but being always careful to affirm her complete devotion to her middle-aged husband. Nevertheless, many spiteful persons did not hesitate to declare that young Queneau was her lover, and not the only one. When the Beroldys had been in Paris about 3 months, another personage came upon the scene. This was Mr. Hiram P. Trapp, a native of the United States and extremely wealthy. Introduced to the charming and mysterious Madame Beroldy, he fell a prompt victim to her fascinations. His admiration was obvious, though strictly respectful. About this time, Madame Beroldy became more outspoken in her confidences. To several friends, she declared herself greatly worried on her husband's behalf. She explained that he had been drawn into several schemes of a political nature, and also referred to some important papers that had been entrusted to him for safekeeping, and which concerned a secret of far-reaching European importance. They had been entrusted to his custody to throw pursuers off the track, but Madame Beroldy was nervous, having recognized several important members of the revolutionary circle in Paris. On the 28th day of November, the blow fell. The woman who came daily to clean and cook for the Beroldys was surprised to find the door of the apartment standing wide open. Hearing faint moans issuing from the bedroom, she went in. A terrible sight met her eyes. Madame Beroldy lay on the floor, bound hand and foot, uttering feeble moans, having managed to free her mouth from a gag. On the bed was Monsieur Beroldy, lying in a pool of blood, with a knife driven through his heart. Madame Beroldy's story was clear enough. Suddenly awakened from sleep, she had discerned 2 masked men bending over her. Stifling her cries, they had bound and gagged her. They had then demanded of Monsieur Beroldy the famous secret. But the intrepid wine merchant refused point-blank to accede to their request. Angered by his refusal, one of the men incontinently stabbed him through the heart. With the dead man's keys, they had opened the safe in the corner and had carried away with them a mass of papers. Both men were heavily bearded and had worn masks, but Madame Beroldi declared positively that they were Russians. The affair created an immense sensation. It was referred to variously as the nihilist atrocity, revolutionaries in Paris, and the Russian mystery. Time went on, and the mysterious bearded men were never traced. And then, just as public interest was beginning to die down, a startling development occurred. Madame Beroldi was arrested and charged with the murder of her husband. The trial, when it came on, aroused widespread interest. The youth and beauty of the accused and her mysterious history were sufficient to make of it a cause célèbre. People ranged themselves wildly for or against the prisoner, but her partisans received several severe checks to their enthusiasm. The romantic past of Madame Beroldi, her royal blood, and the mysterious intrigues in which she had her being were shown to be mere fantasies of the imagination. It was proved beyond doubt that Jean Beroldi's parents were a highly respectable and prosaic couple, fruit merchants, who lived on the outskirts of Lyons. The Russian Grand Duke, the court intrigues, and the political schemes, all the stories current, were traced back to the lady herself. From her brain had emanated these ingenious myths, and she was proved to have raised a considerable sum of money from various credulous persons by her fiction of the crown jewels, the jewels in question being found to be mere paste imitations. Remorselessly, the whole story of her life was laid bare. The motive for the murder was found in Mr. Hiram P. Trapp. Mr. Trapp did his best, but relentlessly and agilely cross-questioned, he was forced to admit that he loved the lady, and that, had she been free, he would have asked her to be his wife. The fact that the relations between them were admittedly platonic strengthened the case against the accused. Debarred from becoming his mistress by the simple, honorable nature of the man, Jean Beroldi had conceived the monstrous project of ridding herself of her elderly, undistinguished husband and becoming the wife of the rich American. Throughout, Madame Beroldi confronted her accusers with complete sang-froid and self-possession. Her story never varied. She continued to declare strenuously that she was of royal birth and that she had been substituted for the daughter of the fruit seller at an early age. Absurd and completely unsubstantiated as these statements were, a great number of people believed implicitly in their truth. But the prosecution was implacable. It denounced the masked Russians as a myth and asserted that the crime had been committed by Madame Beroldi and her lover, Georges Queneau. A warrant was issued for the arrest of the latter, but he had wisely disappeared. Evidence showed that the bonds which secured Madame Beroldi were so loose that she could easily have freed herself. And then, towards the close of the trial, a letter, posted in Paris, was sent to the public prosecutor. It was from Georges Queneau, and without revealing his whereabouts, it contained a full confession of the crime. He declared that he had indeed struck the fatal blow at Madame Beroldi's instigation. The crime had been planned between them. Believing that her husband ill-treated her, and maddened by his own passion for her, a passion which he believed her to return, he had planned the crime and struck the fatal blow that should free the woman he loved from a hateful bondage. Now, for the first time, he learnt of Mr. Hiram P. Trapp and realized that the woman he loved had betrayed him. Not for his sake did she wish to be free, but in order to marry the wealthy American. She had used him as a catspaw, and now, in his jealous rage, he turned and denounced her, declaring that throughout he had acted at her instigation. And then Madame Beroldi proved herself the remarkable woman she undoubtedly was. Without hesitation, she dropped her previous defense and admitted that the Russians were a pure invention on her part. The real murderer was Georges Queneau. Maddened by passion, he had committed the crime, vowing that if she did not keep silence, he would enact a terrible vengeance from her. Terrified by his threats, she had consented, also fearing it likely that if she told the truth, she might be accused of conniving at the crime. But she had steadfastly refused to have anything more to do with her husband's murderer, and it was in revenge for this attitude on her part that he had written this letter accusing her. She swore solemnly that she had had nothing to do with the planning of the crime, that she had awoke on that memorable night to find Georges Queneau standing over her, the blood-stained knife in his hand. It was a touch-and-go affair. Madame Biroldi's story was hardly credible, but this woman, whose fairy tales of royal intrigues had been so easily accepted, had the supreme art of making herself believed. Her address to the jury was a masterpiece. The tears streaming down her face, she spoke of her child, of her woman's honor, of her desire to keep her reputation untarnished for the child's sake. She admitted that, Georges Queneau having been her lover, she might perhaps be held morally responsible for the crime, but before God, nothing more. She knew that she had committed a grave fault in not denouncing Queneau to the law, but she declared in a broken voice that that was a thing no woman could have done. She had loved him. Could she let her hand be the one to send him to the guillotine? She had been guilty of much, but she was innocent of the terrible crime imputed to her. However that may have been, her eloquence and personality won the day. Madame Biroldi, amidst a scene of unparalleled excitement, was acquitted. Despite the utmost endeavors of the police, Georges Queneau was never traced. As for Madame Biroldi, nothing more was heard of her. Taking the child with her, she left Paris to begin a new life.